So we'll be talking about future of tech investments. I have all VCs here, and let's start with you. Ladies first. So, I mean, maybe you can tell a little bit about your company, first of all, and maybe you can tell us in which stages you do investments, and also what kind of companies you choose for investments, and then we can move on.
Okay, so my name is Vicky. I'm a partner at an early stage VC called Bethnal Green Ventures. We invest in tech startups that are addressing social and environmental issues. So we're looking at how technology can be used to improve healthcare, education, our environment and democracy, and how we can build solutions that will reach everyone, especially those at the sharp end of the problem, and ultimately reduce inequality, which I think technology has the potential to do. We've seen a global widespread adoption of technology across the world, and that means that we're able to build solutions that reach more and more people. The types of technology that we invest in is very diverse, so 3D scanning, printing, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, all of those technologies we think can be used to tackle some of the world's most pressing problems. So that's what our focus is when we're making investments, is not just the tech, but where is this technology addressing an issue in the world.
How long your fund has been in the market? For how long have you been doing this?
Our fund is 5 years old. We've invested in 110 startups.
Wow.
We're an early stage investor though, so we invest £20,000 in exchange for 6% equity, and then we do follow-on funding and lifelong support for that startup. Our oldest startup now is called Fairphone. It's an ethically sourced smartphone trying to open up the supply chain of electronics, selling hundreds and thousands of phones based out in Amsterdam. Got on to raise Series A, and we're continuing to support them through our mentorship and expertise, but our investment doesn't go beyond sort of 50 to 70 grand.
Wow.
So I would say sort of the biggest thing that we're doing is actually the human capital, and which I actually think gets them a lot further.
Oh, sounds great. We'll talk more, definitely. Sean?
Yes, well, we are an early stage, but I realize now when I say early stage, we are definitely not that early stage. So we typically write checks for between €500,000 and €1.5 million into young emerging digitally enabled businesses. We do invest across Europe, and in our legal documents, we actually defined Europe as Eurovision Song Contest countries. And so I didn't see Turkey in the finals this year, but I assume you're still participating in...
We are boycotting them.
Okay, so maybe you can't invest in Turkey now unless you make the finals of Eurovision, but we always wanted the biggest definition of Europe that there is, and that is the broadest definition of Europe that exists. Our focus is on investing into companies that use technology to improve what are broken, crappy customer experiences. So that's the way we think about it. So how is the business using technology to remove friction, to make faster, to make easier, better, cheaper? What are tough things for individuals or for businesses to have to do on behalf of their customers? So we invest in e-commerce companies, marketplaces, mobile apps, and a broader variety of different kinds of businesses.
Cool. I mean, you haven't invested in any company in Turkey yet.
No, we have not yet, no. No reason why, we just have.
And do you also, I mean, I know not Turkey, but do you only invest in UK, or you have like global?
So the startups that we invest in, they have to be registered as UK companies. However, we have been able to invest in startups that aren't necessarily based here in the UK. And what we're looking for when we're making that investment is that they have potential to go global. So we want to see scalable solutions. So,
I see.
but at the moment, it has to be a UK registered company for us to be able to make that transaction.
White Star Capital. Is that White Star from Turkish flag?
No, somebody pointed out the other day, it's not White Star from the Titanic either.
Oh, okay.
So White Star Capital is a fund we created 2014. We invest 500,000 to 5 million initial check, which can mean everything from seed to Series B, based on the geographies that we invest in.
It's euros, right? Not
dollars.
Dollars.
We have a presence across the Atlantic, so London, New York, Montreal, and now opening up an office in Paris. And we invest across North America and Western Europe. As you know, I'm a big fan of Turkey. We have not done any investments in Turkey yet. I would love to have an excuse to go back to Istanbul. And actually, there's some great momentum in the market as well. In terms of stuff that we get excited about, companies that are building either proprietary data assets or actually mining data in an interesting way, and this can be applied to both consumer and enterprise businesses. We've done everything from robotic locksmiths in the US to pet food, fresh pet food here in the UK, and we have 26 portfolio companies to date.
Nice, cool. So, what is changing in VC ecosystem in terms of like type of companies? For example, do you? I know you don't, but like, do you still get excited about an e-commerce company? Just asking. Still, yeah. I mean, gaming is definitely interesting, especially for investors looking into Turkey, because like, I think 6 months. Like totally $350 million has been spent on Turkish gaming companies.
But you know what's crazy about it? That's not only a Turkish phenomenon. If you were looking at the crude numbers, you should only invest in games companies in Europe.
Yep.
So if you look at companies like the Candy Crush makers King, which was sold for $5 billion, you look at Supercell, which was an $8 to $10 billion exit somewhere in there. Then you look at Minecraft with Mojang being bought by Microsoft for $2 billion, CSR Racing in the UK being bought for $500 million, Social Point in Spain being bought for a few $100 million. You would only do gaming, but obviously the world is broader than just gaming. But on the other hand, I think there are certain areas where Europe's got kind of very good core strengths and abilities, and you should definitely focus on investing in those areas and reinforce where success is. And I think obviously gaming has been one of them. AI is another area where Europe is actually leading the charge as well, and there are great AI centers and clusters being developed. But also, if you think about it traditionally, the fashion world has centered around Europe, right? London and Paris and Milan. So I think that's another area where there's strong expertise. And the same reason we see a huge number of fintech companies coming out of London, as London, Switzerland have always been the traditional home of the kind of banking and finance world. And we're seeing now kind of really good companies coming out from that deep experience in these sectors.
I mean, AI is one of the new kids on the block, definitely, and like fashion is right. That's right. On your side, you do invest in health tech companies, yeah, and also like some education and some others. But in terms of health, what's like the portion of health investments in your portfolio, or which one is the biggest one?
Health is a really big one. Most of our applications do come through health. I would think it's about 35% of our portfolio is made up of health, just because it can mean so many different things. Tackling one of our startups is called Doctor Doctor. They've built a smart booking system for hospital appointments in the NHS, saving hospitals, the NHS billions of pounds every year by creating an algorithm to reallocate missed hospital appointments within that moment in time. So it could be sort of tech that improves infrastructure, whereas then you can look at mental health, building peer-to-peer apps that help people connect around mental health challenges, using virtual reality in order to improve therapy, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy. It's really difficult for therapists to remake very challenging environments if someone struggles from OCD and you need to remake that environment for them. Virtual reality can do that. So yeah. Health can span across lots of different things in tech.
Can I ask a question? Sure. Can I play moderator just for a moment?
Sure, go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt, but
please.
And the reason why is I'm going to bring in Christian into this as well.
Yeah,
but
please.
How do you guys think about the impact of kind of profit-seeking versus societal benefits? And because you mentioned health tech as well, or healthcare, because Christian, you've also invested in a healthcare company which helps with prescriptions online, and I know you well. You probably hope they do better for the world, but you want to make money for your fund and generate big returns. Whereas I think, how do you guys think about the ratio between those two?
So we are very commercially driven in how we think about our investments. We're looking for startups that are going to be giving great returns for us on our investments, so we can give great returns to our investors. We're not looking at sort of nicey nice here. Like, we think that there's a huge market opportunity for investing in solving huge social problems. So when we think that you can have a business model which at the heart of it creates social impact, and I don't think, well, we're trying to prove at BGV that you don't have to compromise on one or the other.
Yeah, I agree. I think So we did a healthcare investment, and I think a part of that and part of an internal conversation that I've been having with myself, it's like, yes, they're going to sell medicine online, and yes, it helps the NHS because you spend less time there, and yes, it's a huge issue around people who get their medication and don't take it because they get sicker and end up going back into the hospital, so you can build a big business. But if we're in so venture capital is a power return business. Like you have 10 companies, 100 companies in the fund, there's 2 that will actually make all the money, 30 that will die, 30 that will be nice but not big enough. But I think to make power law returns, you have to think about more than just financial revenue transaction. So you saw the blog post I wrote. I'm all about backing shit that matters. Let's actually focus on stuff that actually, yes, can be profit-generating business, but actually the multiplier effect of what it does could actually be massive, right? So you think about Uber, the multiplier effect it's having on employment, on urban environments is huge. Airbnb, and I think the healthcare space specifically, because A, it's so, especially things like the NHS, so constrained from just the capacity, B, the population is aging and therefore we can't satisfy it, and B, our generation has to pay for that older generation and it's just not going to have capacity. And I think technology plays a role in that space. We had a digital awards for good or something like that we hosted here in London, and I was on the judging panel, and I'd say I think about 3/4 of the finalists were from your portfolio.
From our portfolio?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I think like 4 of the winners were Bethnal Green venture companies. So I think you can have both. The issue is when you talk about stuff like this, the first question will be, yeah, but does that make money?
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, it's still being proven, right?
Well, it's traditionally, if you're doing something that has a social mission, then you'll put in the nice box of that's really nice, and you assume that you're a charity or a not-for-profit. Whereas, if we actually want to make a dent in any of these social issues that we have in the world, we have to find commercial models that will allow them to scale, and it can happen.
And it's innovation through using the notion of venture and innovation to actually drive disruption in the spaces. There's actually the former advisor to the Prime Minister of the UK, who used to work down the street, leaves government after Cameron steps down, and of all the things he could do in the world, he goes and creates a GovTech incubator, effectively trying to bring all the startups he was working with to go help solve the issues that government has. And essentially, they've been amazing with the portfolio companies we work with on, but it's not the typical thing you would expect, right? Innovation for government doesn't sound that exciting.
I mean, I think like tech startups environment is also changing. Like years ago, I remember when I was in San Francisco for Y Combinator demo day, there were like startups on stage, and they were usually talking about some really huge things, but there was actually no revenue stream, and they were only talking about their valuations and like big investments, just increasing their valuation, and at the end, nothing happens, down rounds and everything. So now, last year or the year before, I'm not sure when I was there, Y Combinator companies were talking about revenue and profits. So things are changing now. Earlier today, we had a couple of panels, and again, like most of the investors and like accelerators, they were all talking more about the revenue, how to generate revenue. So I think it's changing now. Like people, I'm not sure, I mean, investors don't really want to see some added value and value in the on top of the valuations, but also they want to have this revenue stream.
I think yes and no. I mean, the question's always tricky like that. I think what is interesting is that we see more and more companies now that instead of walking in from day one with the global world-changing vision about what they're going to do, they try to come in and solve a very particular pain point for a very specific set of customers, and then use that as the wedge to get in and kind of grow from there. So we made an investment in a tax company in Germany, which basically started out by making it very easy for students to file their taxes and maximize their returns. When they came to us, they were like, listen, we know how to target these people on Facebook. Students, do you want to get money back from the government? It works really well. Go in there and use that as a basis to broaden and deepen the relationship with them over time, sell them additional financial services, and then move into other kinds of customers as well. And I think that's just, at least what we see with European companies, that's becoming the more kind of common way to talk about a vision for how you grow the company. It's really articulating the steps that you take to eventually achieve the big, hairy, audacious goal.
And I used to have this fight a lot with European entrepreneurs would be like, well, the US VCs are all about growth, and the European VCs are all about revenue. And give me an example. It's like, well, Facebook, you know, they were all about growth. I'm like, no, trust me, I was actually in there, and we were very much about revenue. Google was actually profitable before it went public. Facebook, I think, was making 300 million in revenue before it went public, right? So yes, growth along with revenue is important.
Snapchat was quite different.
Yeah, well, I'm not a shareholder, so maybe it's for a reason. But so I think both are necessary, and the least dilutive form of capital is from your customers. Your customers giving you money allows you to keep on growing and scaling without having to give away equity. So yeah, I think both can coexist. To get to scale, you do need to have a certain level of revenue, a certain level of maturity of the business as well that actually can prove that that revenue model either expands or can get plucked and put into a new geography to scale, which is still a challenge we have in Europe. Each individual market is still a fraction the size of all the US or all of China.
One last question. We still have some 4 minutes time, that's okay, but like, I really want to know, what do you think about blockchain and cryptocurrencies? Do you invest in blockchain companies, or, I mean, because like when I talk to my friends, most of VCs, they either do, oh no, or they say, we are still exploring, we're still trying to understand, and some of them just does it because they have a blockchain fund. So what's your perspective on this?
We've invested in a blockchain startup called Alice that's trying to open up the transparency and trust with donating to charities, seeing in the world that the donations to charities is declining because people don't trust that the money that they're putting in actually they can't see the results of that money. So by using blockchain technology, what their product does is you donate the money and it doesn't actually go into the charity until they've shown the results. So it's able to sort of track the money that's going into charities to improve people's trust, and they're doing very well. So I think blockchain is a great system in order to open up transparency and trust in a way that we haven't been able to do in finance before.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we could spend hours talking about blockchain and ICOs and so forth. I think there are certain applications where decentralized systems make sense. There are a lot of applications where centralized systems actually work really well, and the last thing we want to do is fuck them up in any way. So I'm not sold that everything needs to be blockchained or blockchainized or whatever it might be. What I do find fascinating is the growth, obviously, in ICOs and token offerings, and what that means for us as investors and you guys as founders. Because frankly, if I were setting up a company and could raise in an ICO, of course I would do it right now, because there's basically no dilution, you don't give up any equity, there's no control rights, those nasty VCs can't block anything that you want to do, and you get in effect, a much higher valuation. So of course you want to do that. Now, I would pitch to you and say, ooh, the network can be helpful, and corporate governance is important, and all this kind of stuff, but it's a no-brainer right now if you can raise money to raise it in a token offering. Now, it's mostly illegal because people are selling security tokens, not utility tokens, and the governments are starting to crack down. There's a whole host of issues, but it's a fantastic funding mechanism right now. It's amazing.
Other way around, right? They're selling utility tokens, not security.
Yes, sorry.
Yep. And by the way, if you do raise an ICO, VCs might not be able to invest in future rounds, and that's creating an issue. Like right now, a lot of lawyers are getting a lot of money. Us going through our legal documents, trying to figure out if we can invest in ICOs. So we have 2 other companies pursuing them, and we might not. Because it's not legal in other countries where our investors come from, and we have some rules that we can't invest in anything illegal, so we can't take the risk of it becoming illegal later on, and we're holding onto tokens. So it's actually it's really interesting. So the EIF can't touch ICOs right now because the EU hasn't determined. I think the EU hasn't determined yet what the legality of how it's going to be treated, an asset or not. So yeah, tokenized coins actually make it easier for VCs. And my same point on blockchain, right? Don't try to just jam blockchain into everything. There's models where it works and makes sense. Supply chain is really interesting. Smart contracts really interesting. But I don't necessarily it's going to be blockchain or private chains that are going to take off. And still experimentation phase.
This is still experimental, and we're still in the beginning of everything. So I'm a big believer in blockchain in a way. So and I think for the VCs, for the investors, it's that good technology. I mean, tokenization is, I believe, which is good. And like in terms of liquidity and like all other stuff, it's easier.
But it's not Prada money. So like you introduce me to your wife, right? So it's like until your billions in Bitcoin allow you to go to a shop and buy her a Prada bag, it's not real money.
That's right. So I mean, like we'll see what will happen in the future.
I suspect we'll end up in a hybrid structure going forward, right? Where there will be an element of investment for equity and the requisite controls that come with that. And then layered on top of that, you will have token offerings where you're able to, in effect, I think it's almost help seed the community and get your users involved early and also generate some revenue up front from it.
Thanks for joining us. It was nice having you here, and thank you for coming here. And hopefully we'll be organizing more events in Europe, so we'll see each other soon. Maybe in Istanbul as well.
Or Istanbul.
Yeah, if you like, why not? We will have our big event, Webrazzi Summit in Istanbul, 17th October. Why not? I'll let you know. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.